video, we'll go over how we conduct substantive testing at an audit client. And to be able to do that, I'm using the Cloud9 casebook produced by Wiley, by Campbell and White. So yes, the white is me there. And we're going to look at assignment 10, which is about substantive testing. And so what students have to do is they need to complete this audit program here. So we've got a number of different tests, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different tests. And then we've got tick marks. So if you haven't seen my video on documenting audit work papers and what tick marks are, make sure you have a look at that. Essentially, a tick mark is simply shorthand to represent a particular quality. So for example, in this one, A in our work papers will represent that an invoice matches the quantity invoice matches the quantity received on the receiving report and on the purchase order. So we're going to need to complete all of these tests with our audit evidence. So the first thing I'm going to do is put my initials in. Use your own initials. All right, AW. And then the date prepared. So today's date is the 12th of November here in Australia. And I've got my details. So this is here to make sure that we know who has prepared the work paper. Electronically, of course, you'll see electronic signatures, but we're doing the old paper kind. Now I'm going to flick to my audit evidence first, because to be able to do all these tests, back here at the end of the book, I have a whole lot of work papers or audit evidence in Appendix 6. But the first thing I need to do is I need to actually give them all a work paper reference number. So you'll see here we've got work paper A10-1. We've also got some other work papers, 10-2 and 10-3, as well as 10-4. So that's all the work papers for that assignment. I'm going to start my documentation at assignment 10-5. So you see 5. Next page over, I'm going to call it page 6. Page 7. And lastly, page 8. This is so that if I have 50 or 100 pages, they're all easily numbered. All right. So I've got my first test. I want to make sure that the quantity invoiced is the same as the quantity received, and I'm going to use the tick mark A. Let's go to my evidence. Okay. All right. So for each item, I want to make sure that 20 here matches 20 over here, matches 20 on the invoice. All right. So I'm going to put it as close as possible to the item. Now, remember our test says, let me find it here, supplier invoice match the quantity invoiced to the quantity received. Okay. So we've got 20 invoiced, 20 received. It's pretty easy. Actually, I'm going to do these in green pen because this is the color pen an auditor normally uses. Then we've got 10 and 10. And we've got 2 and 2. That's correct. All right. Now let's do the next one, which is receiving report 718, which relates to purchase order 635, 500, 475, and 258. 500. So here we have a difference. This 500 is correct, and the 258 is correct, but the 475, there's clearly a difference here. So I'm going to put a big X and a circle on both of those as an indicator that something's wrong. And then I'm going to write a little explanation. So on A10-7, invoice shows 450 quantity. All right, and down here on A10-6. Receiving report for 475. So we've certainly been undercharged there. Okay, so we found an error. How am I going to record that? Well, I'm going to use this table here. Okay, so I'm going to gather some information about the dates and transactions. I'll just quickly transcribe those. All right, so and I'm going to use the purchase order date here. Okay. Now I also need the receiving report numbers. I'll just copy those in quickly. 654, 718, 788. And then, okay, so quantity match. We know that for A, the quantity match was correct. I'm going to put a tick there. But we know for the second one, receiving report 718 and 635, there definitely was an error. So we received 475, but we're only charged for 450. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a cross. And I'm going to put the work papers that we're looking at, 6 and 7. Okay, now let's do the next two. Look at them. Quantity 5, correct? 25 and 25. Okay, 295. 327, 185, those are all correct. Okay, now I can go back here and I can say that these two tick, tick. All right, let's look at test B. Paper cut. Test B says for each supplier invoice, recalculate the cost of each line item. All right, so here I need my calculator. I'm going to get my trusty iPhone out. All right, so I go 20 times 24.95, 4.99. That's correct. So I'm going to use the B tick mark. See my little B right there. 10 times 72.98. Oops, sorry, I'm doing that in the wrong place. B, and 2 times 3, 58. Correct. All right, so for the first one, everything is correct. Now we're going to run into some issues though here. So here I'm going to go, it should be 475 times 85. All right. 475 times 85 should equal 443.75. All right. And that one's correct. Okay, and now let's move down here. That's correct. That one's correct. And let's switch over. All right, So in all of our others, except that one, we have an error. And what I'm going to do here is I'm also going to put a reference back to the work paper where we're recording all of the data in that summary table, which is A10-2. So if we go back and fill in our table here, line cost, correct, correct, correct. But obviously we've got that one error on work paper A10-7. Okay, let's look at part C, test C. Test C says for each supplier, calculate the total cost of the invoice. All right, and then D, match the amount to the purchase journal and make sure it's in the right period. So we've got a couple of different tests to do. So this one's pretty easy. I just need to add up these figures. $4.99. All right, 125, 1235.96. That's correct. I can use the C tick mark there. Okay, I know this one's going to be wrong, so I'm just going to do the other three first. 1695 plus 623.75. 231875, that's correct. Whoops. 56184, correct. Okay, but here's where we're going to have some issues because it should be 62,500 plus 4375 plus 21,930. So it should be 124,805. Instead, it's only 122,000. So again, we've got another error there. And I'm going to record that on my cover page. Tick, 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 but an error here on A10-7. Okay, now we have to do the journal check. So what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that this number here matches my journal entry over there. Okay. So 1235.96, 1235.96. Now remember to tick mark in both places, D and D, for the amount being correct. Now we know this one's going to be incorrect. We calculated over here that it should be 124,805. So I'm going to say big cross there. All right. We need to go back to A10-7. I'll write a little note. Should be 124,805. All right. So what I'm being very careful to do is I cannot use the D notation here, right? Because C and D, both of those are incorrect. Let's go down to the bottom. 2318.75. 2318.75, that's fantastic, correct. And 56,184. 56,184. Fantastic. Okay. All right, so let's record those back in our summary table. Tick, cross, and obviously that's incorrect on work paper 8. Tick, tick. Now let's do the period check, which means let's look at the journal entry and check the dates. Okay, 2010, recorded in the correct period. Were goods received in 2010? Yes, yes. I can use my E, that's correctly recorded. What about my inventory? 2010, 2010, 2010, that's all correct. Some office expenses, 2010. Yep, 2010, all in the correct period. Now here we have a journal entry from 2011. So that might be that on the last day of the financial year, this got pushed back in terms of invoicing. So here we have an issue because goods were received on the very last day of the financial year. So they should be recorded in the 2010 financial period. So we have here a cut-off error, and we're going to need to record that back on our summary sheet. Okay. So these were all in the correct period except for this one, which we can look at on work paper page 8. Okay, so now we've done testing, and you'll notice here on the items, it's item 22, 23, 24 and 25. They tested 1 to 21, there were no exceptions. So these are the only ones where we've got errors. Now what we need to do, oh, and I forgot something up here, put my initials in so that people know it. I filled out this part of the work paper. Now I need to fill in this one. So my initials. If you always put your initials first, you never forget, you never lose marks in an exam. So here we need to record our misstatements, and we know from our previous table we've got one sort of flow-on error and one cut-off issue. All right, so let's look at the misstatement, and I'm just going to pick one of the ones back here. All right, we know we've got a big issue over here. So we've got a recorded amount in the journal of $122,680. However, our audited amount from our paperwork is $124,805. And when it says misstatement here, I'm just going to put in a document number. So I'm going to use the original purchase order number, which is this one here, 635. PO number 635. All right, so let's calculate the misstatement. 124,850 minus 122,680. Whoops. Means there's a difference of $2,125. Now here I'm not looking at overstatements or understatements. At this stage you can just look at absolute values, but in practice you will need to make sure that you look at whether this is an understatement or an overstatement. Now we know our second issue is in relation to purchase order 713. 713. The recorded amount is actually zero because in the 2010 financial year there's no transaction, but it should be included, and that amount was 56,184. So my misstatement amount is 56,184. All right, so the total value of the misstatement, 2125, 56,184, is 58,309. Okay, now we know that when we're calculating samples, I need to project the misstatement because the reason why we sample is we can't test everything. So I'm selecting a sample and then I'm projecting what the misstatement should be. So I'm going to take this number down here. That's pretty easy. I've been given the dollar value of the sample, so divide it by 738174. Okay, so that gives me a percentage error of about 7.9%. All right, now if I project that error to the population of 20 million, oops, and I've got a error there, 2596975. There we go. That gives me a projected dollar value of misstatement of 1.6 million, 26,900, and let's round that up to the whole dollar. All right, so what are my conclusions here? If I go back to my previous assignment on materiality, we calculated materiality to be about 185,000, roughly. So we've certainly gone above materiality there. So in terms of conclusions, what should I do? First thing is that we need to do some further investigation. Right? What causes us to receive more goods but then be charged less? Is that an error? Is it a one-off? We need to do some further investigation into the identified errors. All right. For my cutoff error, I'd certainly want to do some more cutoff testing. So further investigation and then also more testing. Especially around cutoff. And so that might involve there selecting a sample or selecting all transactions from maybe a week before and after the end of the financial period to make sure that there's not any others that are potentially misstated. Now, what you also have to do in this assignment is some journal entry. So if I had to adjust or if I had to request management make the adjustments, here's the journal entries that I request. Now, obviously here we have understatements of inventory and accounts payable. So I need to add, we can do this on the last day of the financial period, that's fine. I need to increase my inventory. And I need to increase my accounts payable by the difference, which is 2125. All right, and I'm going to put that down to purchase order 635, understated invoice. All right, and the next one I'm going to do is my error here in the wrong period. So essentially what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to take it out of January and add it back into December. So if I add it into December, and it's probably going to be, let's look at this, it was inventory and accounts payable. Is it? Yep, so it's inventory and accounts payable. So I'm going to put it into inventory in 2010 for, what was that, 56184. 56184. 56184. And I'm going to take it out of January, because remember this is what's recorded. In the 7th of the 1st, 2011, we're going to take it, oops, wrong box. I'm going to take it out of inventory there and put it into accounts payable. All right, so this is all because here we've simply got different dates. So I'm reversing the January entry and including it in 2010. So that's all for assignment 11. Once we've done all our tests, of course, we need to go back and fill in our first page. So I did this bit and this bit. This bit. Now you might think, oh, well, look, it's pretty easy if the person who's preparing it is doing all of the work papers. However, that might not always be the case in a really big audit. So in a really big audit, you might have 20 different tests, and those different tests might be done by 5 different people. So it's important there that we have the correct names. Now in terms of references, I'm going to refer to the work papers that we used for our particular documentation. So certainly, the first one was 10-6 and 7. A10-6 and 7. The invoices, I used 10-7, A10-7, A10-7, and now the purchase journals, that's A10-7 and A10-8. And then for this one here, purchase journals in the correct financial period, we used the journal entry, which was 8, and then the date the goods were shipped or received, which is A10-6. So now I've completed assignment 10 from Cloud 9, and that's how we do our substantive testing.